From the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center in New York, Megan Thompson.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. Several hundred Central American migrants pushed past Mexican police guarding the international border crossing between Tijuana, Mexico, and California this afternoon. There are reports that some of the migrants carried hand-painted American and Honduran flags and chanted, "We are not criminals, we are international workers." They did not cross the border, and the border checkpoint was closed temporarily. Mexican officials continue to deny they've reached a deal with the Trump administration on the political asylum process at the U.S. southern border. News reports yesterday quoted members of the incoming Mexican government, set to take office on December 1st, who said there are ongoing talks with the Trump administration about a major change in current U.S. immigration policy. The new plan would reportedly require asylum seekers to stay in Mexico while their claims are processed in the U.S. courts. Under the proposal, migrants seeking asylum, like the more than 5,000 Central Americans currently waiting in Tijuana, would apply at a U.S. point of entry but return to Mexico while awaiting hearings. We'll have more on the asylum policies and court cases coming up after our news summary. A Brexit deal has finally been reached. European officials met in Brussels earlier today and came to the agreement after nearly a year and a half of intense negotiations. The plan still faces opposition in the UK Parliament, where it may be voted on as early as next month. Britain was a member of the European Union for 45 years and is the first country to leave. Russia's defense ministry said it carried out airstrikes in northern Syria today, the first since a truce went into effect on September 17th. Syrian officials said more than 100 people were treated at hospitals and blamed militants in the region for firing shells filled with chlorine gas at the city of Aleppo. Rebel groups denied using chemical weapons.
No justice, no peace.
Protesters took to the streets as questions continue to be raised about the fatal police shooting of a 21-year-old black man in a mall outside of Birmingham, Alabama on Thanksgiving night. Initial statements from the Hoover, Alabama Police Department said Emantic E.J. Bradford Jr. was shot and killed after police suspected he was responsible for an earlier shooting incident that wounded 2 people in the shopping center. Police later retracted their statement, stating it was unlikely Bradford was involved. President Trump plans to be in Mississippi tomorrow to support Republican Senate candidate Cindy Hyde-Smith at 2 campaign rallies ahead of the Tuesday runoff election with former Democratic Congressman Mike Espy. Hyde-Smith has made a number of controversial comments, including telling voters at a campaign stop recently that if a key supporter, quote, invited me to a public hanging, I'd be on the front row. She later apologized, but said her words were being twisted. Mississippi had the highest number of lynchings of African Americans in the United States. The issue of asylum at the U.S.-Mexico border has been making a lot of headlines this week, spurring a debate not just over immigration policy, but also about the role and independence of the U.S. judiciary. To help make sense of it all, I'm joined now by attorney and journalist Jamie Floyd. She's a legal analyst for WNYC, the public radio station here in New York. Jamie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So as we heard earlier in the show, President Trump has announced that he wants all migrants who are seeking asylum to stay in Mexico as their cases make their way through the U.S. courts. Does he have the legal authority to do that?
He does not. The asylum laws have been made by Congress, and Congress has the authority to either change those laws or leave them in place. This is what the case last week was all about that raised so much controversy in California. Judge Tiger ruling, at least temporarily, that those laws remain in place and that the asylum law, as it currently stands, allows migrants to come in and seek asylum. And the president cannot act unilaterally to change those laws. So no, whatever he may tweet, whatever he may think, he cannot act unilaterally to even work with the government of Mexico, assuming he has, which we don't know that he has, to make a change to our asylum laws as they currently stand.
President Trump had wanted to just deny asylum to anybody who crossed the border illegally.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the legal reasoning for that ruling and
Right.
what's next for that case?
Right. There were two cases. The one that made all the news was the one in California, Judge John Tiger, who's in the Northern District Court, which is actually a trial court. It hasn't gone to the Ninth Circuit, as the president seems to think. That's an appellate court. This is the first stage. The government asking, as you say, essentially to change the asylum laws. And all that he said at this point is that I'm issuing a temporary restraining order on this policy that the executive branch is trying to impose because it seems to violate the laws of Congress. And in December, come back to me and we will hear arguments on the merits.
President Trump was not happy with this ruling. He called Judge Tiger an Obama judge,
Right.
which then spurred a very rare rebuttal from Chief Justice John Roberts, who came out and said, no, there's no such thing as Trump judges. There's no such thing as Obama judges. Trump has made statements like this in the past about judges.
Yes.
Roberts hasn't said anything.
Right.
Why do you think he said something now?
Right. The reason, Megan, I don't know, right? I do think that he certainly wouldn't have wanted to weigh in during the midterm cycle. So maybe that was on his mind. But he is an institutionalist. He is the Chief Justice, not just of the United States Supreme Court, but of the federal judiciary, of the courts. And he wants to protect, again, not wanting to get inside his psychology, but just having read a lot about him and knowing that he very much wants to protect the institution of the courts, he is moving forward to protect his agency in the way so many others have not in the Trump years, in the Trump administration. And we see an attack not just on judges, but on the institutions of justice in this country. And we also saw this bruising battle over Kavanaugh, Justice Kavanaugh, which frayed the institution of the court, the Supreme Court and the courts in general. And I think Chief Justice Roberts wants to tighten the weave of the fabric of the court at this moment in time, this critical moment in time when the courts are going to need legitimacy to protect our laws and our Constitution going forward, as we may be heading into a constitutional crisis.
All right, Jamie Floyd, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Despite political divisions, we asked people on Thanksgiving Day what unites Americans. Watch their responses on our Facebook page at facebook.com/newshour. In 2016, Scott Kelly set a record for the longest space mission by an American astronaut. During his 340 days on the International Space Station, Kelly conducted science experiments, maintained equipment, and took pictures, thousands of them. His new book, Infinite Wonder, showcases his photography. He spoke with me recently from Washington, D.C. about his new book and how he's feeling after spending nearly a year in space. Scott Kelly, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
So most people probably know you as a record-setting astronaut. Fewer probably know that you are also a photographer. I mean, is photography something that you've always been interested in?
You know, not always. I became an astronaut in 1996, and that was, a few years before everyone had a camera in their pocket at all times. So, I think before then, photography was something I maybe did on vacation a little bit. But as an astronaut, photography is a really big part of your job, because we take pictures for scientific reasons, we take pictures for engineering reasons, and then we take photos to share with the public what we're doing in space. So it became part of my job, and I became interested in it, but really as a result of flying in space.
The book is called Infinite Wonder. I mean, what were you trying to capture? What story are you trying to tell?
Well, I think the book has three sections. It talks about the mission of flying in space, and there's a section called The Natural World, which is pictures of the Earth or space that you can kind of recognize what they are. And then the last section is a section that we call Earth Art, how you can take photos of the Earth and really make it look like a wall-worthy piece of artwork.
You write in the book about the first time you launched into space and you looked down on Earth. I mean, you are one of the few human beings who will ever be able to see Earth from this vantage point. Can you describe in words how it feels to see the Earth from there?
Yeah, so, my first flight, we launched at night. And it being my first mission, even on my second mission when I was the commander of the space shuttle, I didn't look out the window during ascent really one time because I was kind of focused on my job, which was being either the pilot or the commander of the space shuttle. And on my first flight, it wasn't until we were in space for about 20 minutes that I just noticed, something on the outside that caught my attention. I actually didn't even know what it is, and I asked the commander of the crew, Kurt Brown. This was his sixth flight, and I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Well, it's the sunrise." And as the sun came up, I just saw how incredibly, breathtakingly beautiful our planet Earth is. I knew right then and there I would never see anything like Earth again from space. It's almost like someone took the most brilliant blue paint and just painted it on a mirror right in front of my eyes, and it was absolutely spectacular.
As you said, some of the photos in the book are of life on the International Space Station. Tell us a little bit more about your time up there. What were you doing, and what was it like to be up there for almost a year in this small space?
Well, in those photos, I tried to capture, a little bit of what people don't generally, see on the space station, a little bit more of the mundane stuff of just, living and working in space, watching TV, having a meal. When you're there on the space station for a long time, our days are filled with work. We do a lot of work on board the space station, a lot of science experiments over the course of the year I was there. We had 400 different science experiments going on. So most of your time is spent either doing science, repairing the hardware that fails. The space station just had its 20th birthday. The first piece was launched in 1998. So, you have to do a lot of maintenance. And then just the taking care of the space station stuff. But you do, have a few hours every day for, doing things that are just for your own enjoyment. One of the things I did was take a lot of photos.
A lot of the photos are abstract. You're almost not quite sure what you're looking at. I mean, what inspired you to take those?
Well, my mother was an amateur artist, and I think I got part of her artistic brain. So I, over time, developed a technique where I could take a close-up picture of the Earth with a really long lens, which is challenging when you're moving at 5 miles a second. So the camera has to move at a very fast but also steady rate to get an image that's in focus. And then using a software program, I would enhance the colors. I wouldn't add any colors, but just enhance them to, bring out the natural colors.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you took these pictures? Were there challenges to taking photos in outer space?
Oh, there's a lot of challenges. Not only are you moving really, really fast, so it takes a long time to develop, to get comfortable enough in space where you have, a steady enough hand to get the pictures in focus, especially when you take pictures at night and you use, camera settings that are, you're more likely to get blurriness due to your ability to track the Earth's surface in a very steady and controlled way.
Part of the reason why you were up there for as long as you were was so that researchers could study the effects of being in space that long on your body. You've been back now for a little over 2 years. How are you feeling?
Well, I feel fine. I mean, I don't have any symptoms of being in space for that long. I still have structural changes in my eyes. Some astronauts that have spent less time in space have that as well. I mean, it's a fairly common thing that we're trying to understand. I have some genetic changes in gene expression. My understanding is 7% of my genes are expressing themselves differently. But those aren't anything that I can feel or are symptomatic. So, to answer your question, I feel fine.
Retired astronaut Scott Kelly's new book is called Infinite Wonder. Thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
And finally tonight, there is something else to do online tomorrow during the Cyber Monday shopping frenzy. You can watch NASA's Mars mission live as the InSight spacecraft attempts touchdown on the red planet at approximately 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And that's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. I'm Megan Thompson. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Bernard and Irene Schwartz, Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, Seton Melvin, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, Dr. P. Roy Vagelos and Diana T. Vagelos, the JPB Foundation, Rosalind P. Walter, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg. Corporate funding is provided by Mutual of America, designing customized individual and group retirement products. That's why we're your retirement company. Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Be more PBS.